Hi, I'm Father Jim Forson, and I'd like to share with you some reflections on this celebration of the Epiphany. Epiphany, as we undoubtedly know, refers to the sudden manifestation, especially of the divine, and our apprehension of that. And I thought maybe today it might be a little fun, if not informational, to give some Catholic trivia about the celebration of the Epiphany, questions that we may have that we don't even know we had. So, on this celebration of Epiphany, we talk about the Magi, but sometimes we say Magi, sometimes we say the three wise men, sometimes we say the three kings, sometimes the astrologers. So, kings, wise men, astrologers, which is it? Well, Matthew, in referring to them as the Magi, means that they were high priests of a cult called Zoroastrianism, which was located in Persia. And so they would, as members of this cult, be studying the stars, and in fact were following a star toward Bethlehem. Hence, astrologers. But also, we refer to them as the three kings. And why? Because it says in both the book of Isaiah as well as the Psalms that when the Messiah comes, kings from all over the world will arrive to worship. Three kings. And we also say three wise men. Why? Because as priests of Zoroastrianism, they would have been highly educated. Therefore, wise men. Now, we also say they brought gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, and what is myrrh anyway? So, why those gifts? Well, those were gifts that were ordinarily given by one king to another. They were very costly and expensive, and they recognized royalty. And so therefore, they brought with them gold, because gold is precious, frankincense, which is a very fine, sweet-smelling aroma, which was often used by the very wealthy to put it delicately, to cover up all the far less pleasant aromas that would be circulating around in a city or in a home because of bad hygiene or proximity to animals or bad sewage systems and all of that sort of thing. So frankincense was a wonderful way of being able to cover up all of those smells. Very expensive. And then lastly, myrrh. Myrrh is that wonderful ointment, like an oil, being used by the very wealthy as both something to calm them or to heal them or to soothe them. You remember the story about Jesus when that one woman anointed his feet with oil. Very soothing. And also, myrrh was used to anoint bodies just before they were buried. And what we might see in this, therefore, is a prefiguration of Jesus' death. And in fact, in the song, We Three Kings of Orient Are, there's one verse that we never sing that speaks of this very thing. When one of the kings sings, "Myrrh is mine, its bitter perfume breathes a life of gathering doom, sorrowing, sighing, bleeding, dying, sealed in the stone-cold tomb." So, myrrh is a symbol both of royalty as well as of death. And we say they came from the east. Why did Matthew make it a point of saying they came from the east? Well, this would be Matthew's way of being able to tell us that they were not Jews. They were foreigners. They were what they would call pagans. And what's remarkable is that the pagans, these people from the east, could recognize the divinity of Christ. But when they arrived in Jerusalem, as it says in Matthew's Gospel, Herod was greatly disturbed, and with him all Jerusalem. The believers didn't believe, and the non-believers did. And then we also say there were three Magi. Why do we say there were three? Matthew doesn't give a number. And in fact, in some of the Eastern Christian faiths, especially those in the Mediterranean area, they say there were as many as 12 Magi. So why do we say 3? You're going to hate this answer. gold, frankincense, myrrh. 1, 2, 3. 3 gifts, 3 kings. That's it. And finally it says, the Magi were overjoyed at seeing the star, and on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. Entering the house. Wait a minute. I thought it was supposed to be a manger, not a house. Well, here we bump into a oddity in our Christian tradition. There is no manger in Matthew's gospel. That would be Luke's gospel. So Luke made mention of the manger and the angels and the shepherds. In Matthew's gospel, none of that is mentioned whatsoever. And in Luke's gospel, there is no Magi. So why are we having this? Well, what happened is people took the stories of Christ's birth out of Matthew, and they put them together with the stories of Christ's birth out of Luke, and they smashed them all together, and they have the tradition we have, which we see under our Christmas trees every year. You have the manger, which is from Luke. You have the wise men, which is from Matthew. You have the angels, which is from Luke. You have Joseph and Mary together, which is from Matthew. You have Herod chasing the child Jesus, which is from Matthew. You have the angels singing and telling the shepherds to come, which is from Luke. They put them all together, and we have the tradition we have. So, those are the little reflections, Catholic trivia on the Magi. And if I could offer maybe just one more reflection. You know, we say that the Magi journeyed from afar. What were they seeking? Well, they were seeking the face of the divine. They were seeking the Lord God himself. And when they saw the divine, all the barriers came down. There they were, educated men from a different faith, sitting side by side with very uneducated Jewish peasants, and they both saw the same thing, and all the barriers came down. That's what happens when we see the face of the divine. And aren't there so many barriers that we have in this world right now? Oh my gosh, look at what's happening between Russia and between the Ukraine. All those barriers that are there, and the barriers that exist between the Palestinian and the Jewish, and the barriers that exist between the Israelis and the Muslims, the barriers that exist in the Sudan and also in Ethiopia, all of this, and the barriers that exist between immigrants and citizens. And it almost seems intractable, doesn't it? Like, aren't we ever going to get better as a people? Are we always going to be like this? And it's tempting to believe what that philosopher Hobbes once said, that man is a wolf to man. And so therefore, I take care of me and mine, you take care of you and yours. And that is such a lie. Because when we see the face of the divine, the barriers come down. You know, there was once in 1914, in World War I, when they declared a truce for Christmas. And on Christmas Eve, the German soldiers began singing Christmas carols. And the French and English soldiers heard them, and they joined in. And soldiers opposite each other in their trenches were singing Christmas carols to each other. And then on Christmas Day, a few brave soldiers came out of their trenches and began offering food and drink to the enemy soldiers. And they began exchanging cigarettes and drink with one another, and there's even stories how they played soccer together. All of that happening. Why? Because for a moment, they saw the divine inside one another. And this was so startling to the generals that on both sides, they forbade their soldiers from ever doing anything like that again. It would ruin the fighting spirit. But isn't that a remarkable story? When we see the divine inside one another, the barriers come down. Here are these foreign magi sitting side by side with Jewish peasants, and all the barriers come down. And so too for us. On this feast of the Epiphany, the Magi for us become a symbol of hope for humanity. And so we begin our journey or continue our journey in search of the face of the divine. And if we see that face in our brothers and sisters, the barriers come down. And when the barriers come down, well then, we will have a happy new year. Happy New Year.